Radicalization, unemployment, record birth rates, and the collapse of vertical management structures. This is how the well-known Z-War correspondent Dmitry Steshin describes the current situation in Dagestan. In a post published on May the 6th, he essentially admits that the region lives by its own laws and is moving further and further away from Moscow. According to Steshin, with a crazy birth rate, 59% higher than the Russian average, there are practically no jobs or real prospects in the republic. Young people are leaving the region en masse, and those who remain are increasingly becoming involved in radical movements. They don't need bright minds here, only impudence and show-offs. He quotes local interlocutors as saying, "The war correspondent was particularly alarmed by the growing popularity of radical Islam among educated families." He cites a case from 2010 when one of the terrorists who blew up the Moscow metro was a girl from the family of a school principal and a PhD candidate who was on the federal wanted list at the time. "Daddy congratulated his daughter on becoming a suicide bomber," Steshin writes. In his message, Steshin says directly, in the conditions of many nations, languages and clans, no functioning vertical power structure exists in the republic. Each official thinks not about the law, but about how not to offend someone inadvertently. The problem is not limited to radicals. It is complex. Weak state infrastructure, chronic poverty, clannishness, high crime rates, and the sense of impunity against the backdrop of a growing population. It increasingly looks less like a region of Russia and more like an independent political zone. Given that only 20 years ago Russia endured 2 bloody campaigns in Chechnya, the current escalation in Dagestan feels like a threatening déjà vu. The 1950s and 1990s already showed that a discontented Caucasus was capable of large-scale rebellion. It was from Dagestan that Basayev and Khattab's militants launched an invasion in August 1999 that marked the beginning of the Second Chechen War. Today's targeted attacks, including yesterday's attack on police that killed 2 security officials, look like an ominous echo of that scenario. Against the backdrop of a demographic decline in central Russia and a growing population in the south, the balance of power is gradually changing. And if today Moscow still pretends that everything is under control, then real control is already eroding, especially considering the combat-ready units of the army are drawn into the Ukrainian front, and internal security is provided by increasingly tired forces of the Russian Guard and the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Against this backdrop, the Kremlin's foreign policy expansion sounds particularly absurd. A country with ungovernable regions and a rotting social structure spends trillions on conquests while ignoring its own hotbeds of instability. Observers no longer doubt that if such processes are not stopped, the issue will soon be not about governing the Caucasus, but about keeping it within the country. And then an explosion from within may be only a matter of time. Russia risks losing another war on its own soil.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has called for his munitions industry to boost the production of artillery shells, state media said Wednesday, as the country continues to supply arms and troops to support Russia's war on Ukraine. According to Associated Press, North Korea's official Korean Central News Agency said that Kim, during recent visits to unspecified munitions and machinery factories, praised modernization efforts that the agency claimed enabled the facilities to double their annual shell production capacity. Kim urged workers to further accelerate artillery shell production, calling it crucial to strengthening the fighting efficiency of his armed forces, and also called for the development of more advanced machinery to boost munitions output. Korea's official Korean Central News Agency did not mention any comments from Kim regarding his support for Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Recent South Korean intelligence assessments suggest that North Korea has sent about 15,000 soldiers to Russia, and that nearly 5,000 of them have been killed or injured while fighting against Ukrainian forces. Washington and Seoul have also accused North Korea of supplying Russia with various types of military equipment, including artillery systems and shells and ballistic missiles. After denying its war involvement for months, North Korea last month confirmed for the first time that it had sent combat troops to help Russia in recapturing parts of the Kursk region, which had fallen to a surprise Ukrainian incursion last year. Moscow also acknowledged the North Korean involvement, with Putin issuing a statement thanking the North for sending troops to support his forces and promising not to forget their sacrifice. The Russian army lost 1,430 soldiers and 176 units of military equipment on the front line of the war with Ukraine between May 5 and 6, according to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Russia has lost 959,500 troops in Ukraine since the beginning of its full-scale invasion on February 24, 2022, the General Staff of Ukraine's Armed Forces reported. A total of 200 combat clashes have been recorded along the front line over the past day. Russian assault operations were concentrated on the Pokrovsk front, where 78 attacks were repelled. Ukrainian forces also repelled 18 assaults in the operational zone in Russia's Kursk Oblast. On the Kharkiv front, 4 combat clashes took place near the village of Vovchansk. On the Kupiansk front, Ukrainian forces repelled 5 attacks near the village of Zarazov, as well as towards Novosanov and Hlushkivka. On the Lyman front, Russian forces launched 31 attacks, attempting to advance near the settlements of Kharkivka, Novomykhailivka, Nov, Kolodyazy, Mern and Torsky and towards Zelina Dolina. On the Kramatorsk front, Ukrainian defenders repelled 4 attacks in the vicinity of Chasiv Yar and Kurdyamivka and towards Bila Ora. On the Toretsk front, 6 Russian attacks were recorded in the areas of Toretsk and Ozeryanivka. On the Pokrovsk front, Ukrainian defenders repelled 78 assaults near the settlements of Sukhabaka, Stara Mykolaievka, Vodiandro, Novodoretsk, Shevchenko, Yudakny, Uspanivka, Troitsk, Kotlyarivka, Bodanivka and Andrivka. On the Novopavlivka front, the defense forces repelled 24 Russian assaults near the settlements of Novopil, Novosilka, Priviln and Komar and towards Odradin. Russian troops also attacked Ukrainian positions 7 times near the village of Vysok on the Huliapol front. On the Siversk and Pridniprovsk fronts, the Russians did not conduct any offensive operations. In the operational zone in Russia's Kursk Oblast, Ukrainian troops repelled 18 Russian attacks. The Russians carried out 330 artillery attacks, including 8 using multiple launch rocket systems, and launched 12 airstrikes, dropping 27 guided aerial bombs. On the Volyn and Politia fronts, no signs of Russian offensive group formations have been detected. Ukrainian troops continue to inflict significant losses on Russian personnel and equipment and are actively disrupting the Russians' offensive potential in the rear.